Thank you all for being here. Really looking forward to the conversation today. I will start just with some housekeeping. Hello, everyone. Welcome to today's webinar on mathematical fluency. My name is Hillary Knutson, Vice President, Whiteboard Advisors, lead of the National Math Improvement Project. We're excited to share our expertise today and get in the weeds on all things math fluency, what it is and what it is not. We look forward to answering your questions, and so feel free to submit questions through the Q&A feature in Zoom, and we'll answer those as time goes on. If you have any issues, you can also chat me directly, but we look forward to sharing with you as we go here. If you have any other questions, please let us know. But Hillary, thank you for joining us. I'm going to hand it over to Dr. Dia Bryant, our moderator for the day, and we'll go from there. Thank you all. Dia, to you.
Thanks, Hill. Welcome, everyone, to a wonderful Thursday afternoon where we all get to kind of nerd out in our very special places around the country to talk about building math fluency and to really share some of the insights and things we've learned from the National Math Improvement Project. I personally am thrilled and honored to have such a strong group of educators, research, state level leaders with us. And I want to dig into some of the most important challenges in math education today, which is really like, how do we help students not just learn math, but truly develop fluency and confidence in it? Building a math identity that is just beautiful for them in their whole academic careers. Over the next hour, we're going to explore some practical strategies, highlight some promising practices from districts and states across the country, and share some insights from the research and what we're learning in the field. Our goal, our only goal, is to spark some ideas. We hope to equip you all with some tools and create space for some dialogue about how we truly accelerate math education and math learning across the country, both in rigorous and equitable ways. We'll begin with a math problem, of course, because how else do you start a math webinar? I mean, what even other way is there to do this? And then we'll start to think through some fundamental differences between two very specific things. How do we define mathematical fluency? Does that mean flexibility or efficiency or accuracy? And then how do we distinguish between fluency and automaticity? And we're hoping to hear from our experts today on what those things mean both in research and in practice. With this beautiful panel, I mean, we're bringing the best, some of the best that our sector has to offer. And so I encourage you to engage in the Q&A box through the chat, asking folks questions. And at the end, we'll save time to answer those questions if we don't get to them along the way. And with that, I'm going to go ahead and kick us off and allow our wonderful experts to introduce themselves. Then we'll put up a quick slide to pivot to the math problem of the afternoon. Dr. Jenny Bay Williams.
Hello, everyone. I'm thrilled to be here. I am an author of Math Fact Fluency and Figuring Out Fluency, which it goes beyond basic facts, and that's a whole book series. I'm a professor at the University of Louisville. Alanna.
Hi, everybody. Alanna Mertens. I am the math manager in Chicago Public Schools. I work in the STEM department, and I've been an educator in Chicago forever, and I'm loving this work because we really believe in the joy of math and learning.
Hi, I'm Laura Glass. I'm the Assistant Commissioner for Education Policy at the New York State Education Department, and my background happens to be in math education, and I'm so excited to be a part of this panel. I started off as a math teacher at the high school level, and then at the college level, I was a math teacher educator. So I'm so excited to talk about this topic.
And we are thrilled to have y'all because I know that you have so many ideas and I'm just ready for all the passion. But let's start here. And I'm going to drop a link to this as well in the chat, either Hillary or I. But let's start with a problem. Go ahead and take a couple moments and solve these two subtraction problems. We'll give you 30 good seconds. Go. Awesome. So these problems are not at all meant to test your accuracy. If that was the case, I'd say whip out that small computer that's in your pocket and find the answer. But this is really about how do we approach problems like this? Are we the folks? I'll tell you me, I'm a pen and paper girl. I like to write things down. Sometimes we do mental math. There are lots of different ways to approach this. I'd love to hear maybe from our panelists some of the many ways that we could see this being done and perhaps strategy or why people don't use different things as they would look at a problem like this. Perhaps we could start with Alanna.
Awesome. Well, I was really thinking about it from a couple angles. I was thinking about with my um, thought of if I was a student and I thought about it, I might just try to line up all those numbers and start subtracting. But then I thought, wow, that's probably not so smart because the numbers are pretty close to each other. So then I thought, well, I could just count up. I could say 195, 196, and just count up and use my fingers to solve that problem. So that's one way. And I could even see that on a number line.
Totally. Jenny, Laura?
Yeah, what I liked about those problems is that you could use different flexible strategies for the two problems, which I thought that was a great point to make. For example, with the 68, then you can get those benchmark numbers, your tens. Like, okay, well, 68, that's really close to 70. Versus the other problem, like 195, well, that's so close to 200, you just like Alanna said, you just count up, like that's 5 more to 200, and then I need 1 more to 201. So it gets at multiple strategies for thinking flexibly.
Totally. Jenny?
So I love this conversation so far. Love the word flexibility and also this idea that Alana's talking about that you start with one idea, but before you dive in, you just pause, right? And just think, wait, I'm not really sure I want to go that way. I'm going to do something else because that's the efficiency, piece at work. And then those strategies are all good ideas that were shared. I solved the first one by counting up. And I solved the second one by using a constant difference. But I could have also taken away 70 and done a compensation strategy of sorts. To me, those strategies pull from different understandings of subtraction. And so I feel like that's part of the fluency conversation, isn't it? Like the counting up is find the difference. How far apart are those two numbers? And yet, if we ask our students or ourselves, what does subtraction mean? It's takeaway. So if you look at 201 minus 195 and you only understand subtraction as takeaway, that count up, great idea for the first problem, is not there for you. Why would you count up if you're thinking of subtraction as takeaway? So I think that's this beautiful blend of how the conceptual understanding gives you access to the fluency.
Yep, I knew you'd go right there. So let's just go ahead and dig in, right? So let's talk a little bit about some of the misconceptions around fluency. What is it? Is it memorization? Is it sort of, I don't know, I went to elementary school in the 80s and it was very like drill, 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 drill. Had to remember all the facts and do everything off the top of your head. What does this sort of fluency mean? Is it memorization? Is it drilling? What is it? Like for the everyday mathematician, what should we understand about it? Jenny, do you want to start? And then Laura, and then perhaps Alanna.
I'm trying to bite my tongue, so
Okay, fine. I'll let Laura go
jump
first,
in, but
and
here I
you
go.
wrap us up, Jenny.
So fluency is definitely not memorization. Memorization is for phone numbers and social security numbers, not for math class. So that's not how we learn. And all numbers are related to each other. And being able to use number relations is the way that you develop the kind of skills that students need. So that's not to say students don't need to be fast with their facts because they do need that automaticity. They do need to know 9 plus 6 is 15 without counting on their fingers or doing a not efficient strategy. But it's ineffective to have them memorize that fact. And we just know that. We have so much evidence on that. So I'm going to stop there and let the others chime in. But I just wanted to take off the plate that fluency has to develop fluency means taking memorization out of the equation, so to speak.
Love it. So if we didn't learn anything today, Let's take that for sure.
I'm
Laura,
taking that one off the top.
yeah. Laura, Alanna.
Yep. Oh, go ahead, Alanna.
I was waiting for you, Laura.
Oh,
But I'll jump in. Well, and something that we've been bringing to Chicago is the work by Arthur Baruti of the University of Illinois. And he really introduced us to this idea there's phases of fluency. So we're not just talking about, we're three phases. So the first phase is like modeling and counting to find the answer. Those are the things that we do really well. And educators do these things really well. They give manipulatives, they let kids count and add things and put things together and subtract things and build that number sense of counting on and counting all. All those things do happen. But sometimes we're in such a hurry that we jump and we skip a phase and we jump right over and we jump to phase three, which is now you just shouldn't have it by memory. So you should just be able to regurgitate that number right away. And Baruti's phases say that there's this middle phase that's really deriving using our reasoning and our logic, right? Which we do have, and our kids have it. And the kids come in with lots of ideas about numbers. So if we don't try to push them too fast into that recall, then we give them time to develop their own strategies. And that is also something that we think about in terms of developing our own math identity, because it's my strategy that I've built that I understand.
I love that.
okay. Well, this might be a good opportunity that I could share with the audience that New York State has just launched our numeracy initiative, and we're really excited about it. And to help with the kickoff of it, we've been working with Dr. Deborah Ball Louisville at the University of Michigan, along with Teaching Works, to develop 8 mathematics briefs, and they are posted online. I'll give Hillary the link in the chat to see if she could share with everyone the link to the numeracy briefs.
You
And
got it.
okay, great. So in those numeracy briefs, it outlines different topics where each of them build on each other. So moving from understanding to using evidence-based practices for teaching math. So for example, the first 2 briefs focus on the research base and debunking myths about mathematics teaching and learning. The 3rd and 4th briefs describe high leverage mathematical content and instructional practices. The next 3 briefs discuss mathematics assessment, representations, and curriculum materials. And then the 8th and final brief outlines how leaders can support evidence-based mathematics teaching. And I wanted to mention that because fluency is woven throughout those briefs. And so in thinking about, well, how was fluency represented in the briefs, looking at our very first one, which is really about the research. Dr. Ball really touched upon, back in 2001 when the National Research Council developed the report Adding It Up, Helping Children Learn Mathematics. In that report, procedural fluency is one of the strands that's interwoven with 4 other strands of mathematical proficiency. We may all remember that braid from that report where fluency was one of those. And in that report, and therefore in our briefs, it talks about that it's skill in carrying out procedures flexibly, accurately, efficiently, and appropriately. And I like that last phrase of appropriately because we always want to do the mathematics in context and really think about, when does it make sense? And that really contributes to the efficiency then of, whatever strategy that we're using.
I love what you name, Laura, because it kind of connects Alana's note about ownership of the identity, ownership of the strategy, along with sort of what we know are the pedagogical pieces. And so I'd love to kind of go from Chicago to New York and then to Jenny on the research about like how do you do this, right? Like I started as a classroom teacher in a middle school teaching, advanced mathematics to 7th and 8th grade students in Brooklyn. How do I do that? What do I do? What are some of the most effective approaches to building fluency, sort of beyond those, remember those worksheets that give you 30 seconds to like fill out a whole sheet of 100 multiplication facts? I don't think that's the best way. Alanna, tell us a little bit about Chicago. Then we'd love to hear about what's happening at the state level in New York. And then, Jenny, if you can round us out with what the research is telling us about the best approaches.
Well, we've been thinking about fluency for a while. We had a Chicago Math Collaborative where we work with Erickson Institute, and they introduced us to games and activities that really engage students in the reasoning and the thinking behind fluency, and that we're not just based on rote memorization. And they also introduced us to all of Jenny Bay's articles that I have taken as I could probably repeat them from memory. Um, now, and so as a district, we started providing professional learning to our younger grade teachers, pre-K through 2, with some of these basic ideas around fluency. That was years ago. I mean, I'm talking 2012. And then along the way, Chicago developed its own curriculum. So we have something called the Skyline curriculum. And one of the things that we asked the developers to add in is a section on fluency and a section on fluency games. So in 2023, 40 fluency games were dropped into this Skyline curriculum. And that was when I moved to the position I'm in now. And my team and I said, wow, let's really build the understanding around fluency so that those games become really appropriate and used in the right ways. And so we set up something and we call it game day, which sometimes, it gets the wrong idea, but it was a 3-hour session and we've done it multiple times, about 24 times over the last couple of years for 500 educators. And when you come to a game day, you learn about the phases of fluency and fluency in 4 parts. And we understand and we ask them to really, teachers to really think about their own understanding of fluency. And then we engage them in the games. And before they leave, they're raving and thinking about how on earth am I going to bring this to my students? And they get excited. And we also give them all the things they would need to play these games. So printed out hard copies or dice or cards. And that has really created a groundswell of excitement around fluency. And when you change someone's minds, we really think about changing hearts and minds. So these are teachers that have been teaching for a very long time and some new teachers. And when they come and they work with each other and they play these games and they get involved in the research, they get excited and they bring that excitement back to their classrooms. They bring that excitement back to their schools. So we're hopefully moving into a place where we're really expanding our understanding of fluency in the whole district.
Yeah, and then so I can tackle that question from a state level perspective. So New York State is a local control state. So just as Chicago came up with their own curriculum, at the state level, we focus on developing the K-12 learning standards in the different subject areas, but also the resources that could support educators throughout the state. So, and with that local control, then they have that flexibility to choose the instructional methods and the curriculum materials that best meet the individual needs of the students. And hence, that's why we came up with these math briefs to provide a resource for educators. But in order to help the educators learn about the briefs, what we did was a statewide event that over 1,700 educators participated in, where what we did was we had a hybrid event with Dr. Ball and Teaching Works, where they would have, present some information about a couple of the briefs. And then at local districts, they were in person, they would go have conversations, and then they would come back and then learn more about, the other briefs, go back to their local discussions and really reflect on it, and then engage in conversations with the state education staff as well. So really having, a full day in May to talk deeply about mathematics, everything from, the research base to how can administrators support teachers in this. It was a really rich conversation at the local level as well as the state level.
So powerful.
Yeah.
That's the work in action. Jenny, give us the deets.
I'm just so wowed by the efforts in these settings because we're talking about cultural practice when we think about how math has been taught, and it's not really working very well in our country, as we know. Like, we have to do better by all of our students. So these approaches are making a difference, and I'm just so excited to hear about them. And they are grounded in the research. So in a quick, like, tip of the iceberg, I want to start with Alanna talking about games. Games are fun, but that's not why to do them. I mean, okay, that can be one of the reasons, but they align with research on learning. For example, think aloud is one of the commonly found results that support students with special needs. Well, when they're playing a game, they have a sentence frame they can be using, or you can I always require that they share how they thought about their strategy when they did their mental math or their written math or whatever. So I have, fluency designed games that take off the time pressure and add in the strategy focus. And so think aloud, peer support, they're stuck, they're right there playing with a friend, their friend can help them, or they can have a partner in the game. Formative assessment, another research-based, these are ones that have made, the list of the, strong impact from What Works Clearinghouse. The teacher is listening while they're playing the games, and, oh, yep, that student's still counting all. We need to do some more work with counting on, or whatever it is, right? So game playing is like effective. It's just effective. So I think that's an important finding. And then playing the things over time, they need that distributed practice. So all of those things are fit in with that. And then I wanted to speak to a couple of other things that have come up that both folks talked about. But one of them is around the work that they're grounding it in from Deborah Ball to Arthur Baruti. They're talking about, meaning making and sense making. And so in a review of the literature, I try to read all literature. I would not say something publicly that I didn't feel was grounded in research. I'm not going to make stuff up, like that's just malpractice. So I have pages and I have hundreds of articles that I've reviewed in order to put out my work to make that the effective teaching of fluency accessible to teachers. So one of them is like longitudinal research. There's not as much longitudinal research, but what predicts student success? Things like number sense and number relations, decomposing, being able to place a number on a number line between 0 and 100, that predicts student success from kindergarten to like grade 2 to grade 3. The people doing that work have found that that matters more than, general cognitive factors. So that's huge. And so that means we have to move away from the drill and move into the number sense. Like, for example, just knowing that 7's one more than 6. That's different than 6 plus 1 equals 7, memorizing that fact. It's knowing it, seeing it on a number line, seeing it with counters, like what's 1 more than 6? I just know it's 7. I have this, like, that's what the age I'm going to be, next year if I'm 6 years old, that really thorough knowledge. So the longitudinal research. And then there's a body of comparing a strategy-based approach, and this is what Baruti's done a lot of, but others have as well, to like a drill-based approach. Those comparison studies always find in favor of the strategy group, because a strategy group is teaching them a reasoning idea, a way to think through the problem, not a way to memorize that's going to be easily forgotten. So there's a lot of those. One of my favorite ones was Gary, 2011, who separated out students with learning disabilities to students without learning disabilities, and had a strategy group, a drill group, and a business as usual group. So all the bases covered. And I wrote this down so I wouldn't get it wrong. The learning disability group grew from a 59 average to a 96 average in their post-assessment. The drill group started at 61, slightly higher, and grew to a 76. So they started 2 points ahead and did 20 points behind the strategy group. And then the business as usual group really did even worse. And that's what I feel like some of the studies compared drill to business as usual. Yeah, this drill group also did better than business as usual, but the strategy group was crazy better. And then with the not learning disabilities, again, the strategy group outperformed the other groups, but the drill group did better, which makes sense that drill can work for students without learning disabilities. But anything based on memorizing is not good for students with learning disabilities. Why is that our intervention approach? That should not be our intervention approach. So anyways, so let me conclude with speaking about memorizing, because I feel like there's a language challenge in doing fluency well. So this is messy, but memorizing means, to me, it's a not just to me, it's a verb. Like, I memorized Alanna's name when I met her. I practiced it. I'm like, face, name, face, name. I'm not very good with names. I memorized her name. I don't have any reasoning strategy for that. But I learned 8 + 6 by regularly jumping up over 10 until, which I still do. If I haven't seen 8 + 6 for a while, or I'm in a group like right now, I am still jumping up over 10 with that number line inside my brain. But other times I just know 8 + 6 because I'm not under any stress. So I really know it in my memory, but I also have a strategy. And I think that's the difference, is I have it, I know it from memory, and I have automaticity, because whether I'm using that jump over 10 or whether I've just remembered it in the moment, I'm coming up with that response without putting a lot of thought into it. It just comes to me automatically. That's automaticity. So I just steer away from the word memorizing, because that's a verb and that's not the way for students to learn 8 + 6. So I just wanted to clarify that. There was a question in the
Yeah.
chat, and I think that's
No,
a
yeah.
really
And I wanted
important
to double click
distinction.
there a little bit. And I want to have perhaps Alana and Laura, like, perhaps confirm or extend something just in your practice space, that sort of elevates what Jenny is sharing, and specifically thinking about memorization and fact retrieval being significantly different than having number sense and understanding, like, the nimbleness of being able to move through the language, essentially, that is mathematics. Would love to have you kind of talk about a little bit of that, pull that thread through, talk about how you're doing that, even in your teacher prep programs, possibly Laura or Alana, how you're doing that as teachers enter the classroom and as, your middle level leaders are trying to sort of coach and lift all boats.
Like, who's going to talk? Um, I mean, this is one of those things that pushes against long-held understanding. I taught for a very long time, and I had a file cabinet full of those mad minutes. And honestly, I taught seventh and eighth grade at the time, and I thought, well, that's the only way for these kids to practice, is just to do these timed mad minutes. And they work for some kids, and they didn't work for a lot of kids. And the kids that still struggled with numbers, it's as if we have left them on an island by themselves. So their only way to get an answer to 7 times 8, it's my favorite one, I talk about it all the time. 7 times 8 is to know it, right? They just have to have that in their memory. And if for anything, like Jennifer talked about, sometimes you're put under stress and you cannot retrieve 7 times 8 is 56. You cannot retrieve it. You're under stress and your mind is not, and especially if you're in a timed situation. However, I do know that I loved doing 7 times 7, and 7 times 7 is 49. And now I just have to add one more group of 7. So I could count on with my fingers, and I can get that answer now. So I have given that child a boat to get off that island by himself. I have to give my students, and actually, this works for adults too. When I talk to adults about that, they're like, I never thought of that. I thought the only way that I would ever learn my multiplication fact was through rote memorization. And so when we start thinking about all the facts that you can learn just through reasoning, and the way that you can build your understanding through reasoning, you should see the light bulbs go on in the teachers' heads. And so when they start really understanding that there's other ways, making 10 strategies, it sounds like something that everybody should be talking about, is making 10. And that's what Jennifer was talking about when she said she crosses over 10, right? So she could take her 6 and her 8 and take 2 away from the 6 and put it with the 10, with the 8 to make 10. And I'm really good at understanding that 10 plus 4 is 14. And so I didn't need to memorize 6 plus 8 at that very moment. I could build my own understanding and share it with you. And so I'm not, and I call it lost on the island. I don't want to ever strand my students out there with no strategy to get to an answer they need. And I see it in all the professional learning I do. And when we open up the door to say, don't just use an algorithm, don't just use a procedure, don't just use that, just think about this problem. think about what it means. Think about what you're trying to do. And that opens a door to, again, bring the person into the mathematics.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
Dr. Bay, yeah, it is beautiful. So yeah, Dr. Bay Williams, I really like this idea of like not using the word memorize. I think that's a really interesting idea because I think what schools, thinking about it more broadly, that, we need to help the educators, including administrators, understand this natural tension between students' mathematical fluency and automaticity versus building for understanding through problem-based instruction. But it's not an either or. They both support each other. And I think when it gets reduced to one or the other, that's when it starts becoming problematic. And so we really need to have this conversation at the school level and the state level to really think about, what do we mean, where's the role of memorization? Where's the role of these strategies? And how do we do it so that our teachers have the knowledge and skills and preparation and professional learning so that they can seamlessly weave in and out of that. So it's not necessarily its attention, but they see it as a toolbox of different ways to look at it. But I mean, it's when you get in these of either or situations that really starts causing some problems at the school level.
Yeah, Laura, I say binaries are really only good for coding. Um,
Yeah.
but you sort of, elevate a question that is from the audience that I think we should consider. Like when we talk about kids being under pressure, and we sort of had this in some of our early conversations, like how do we actually manage the tension of the learning that they need to do, our support for said learning, and any specific math anxieties, plus sort of our assessment culture and how we choose to assess learning and understand. So, would love to hear just any of your general reflections around that question.
I've seen a lot of discussion recently around how to help kids feel like they are math people. And so I think that can help them, relieve some of that anxiety is redefining what does it mean to be a math person and that you can have fun with mathematics and what in mathematics looks, can look different and be in different ways. So I'm really interested in this new trend. So yeah.
I'll just say that there's nothing more anxiety inducing than being in a situation where you're asked to do something you don't understand very well. And I think we can all relate to that with any life skill. For me right now, it's cooking. And so that's math. If you understand what you're doing, adding 9 plus 6 and how that's like 10 plus 6, or how it's different and how you can use that relationship, that's much less nerve-wracking than feeling like you're going to have to recall something that you memorized. So I feel like this is, again, this conceptual understanding. There's a reason why the marrying of conceptual understanding with procedural fluency matters, and it's part of that anxiety piece. And so I think there's that piece. Understanding gives you more confidence going into a task, confidence to read and understand the problem. And I want to go back to something Laura was talking about earlier with the components of fluency, one of them being flexibility, right? So if you're flexible, like if you're in a high anxiety situation, you might just go to like whatever you think you're supposed to do, the standard algorithm or counting on your fingers or whatever it is. But if you can just relax a little bit, then you're like, wait a minute, that's not how I want to solve this problem. Look, this problem has a shortcut, or this problem could be solved more readily this other way. When you're relaxed, you can really reason. So I think this anxiety piece, we have to help coach students on being in, these performance settings where they might feel nervous just because of the setting, but also by just simply, it's not simple, by focusing on building their strategic competence and their confidence, we can help them navigate that space better.
Really good. Would love to hear from Alanna on that one.
I feel like Jenny has just nailed it on the head. I mean, I feel like the idea that we need to just allow ourselves when we're in those situations to take that time and allow our students to take that time. I remember when I was a teacher of algebra, I said, I officially give you all permission to solve this any way you want to. I am giving you permission. You don't have to ask. And because sometimes students would literally come to me and goes, wait, which way do you want me to solve it? I'm like, no, I really want you to solve it the way you're thinking of it. And that's the other part of thinking about mathematics as something we do to make sense of our world. It's about making sense, right? This is part of, that's why math is so much a part of everything we do. It's about making sense of our world. So if we allow students to make sense of the mathematics before we expect them to just perform, and I love the way Jenny said, ask them to practice that and say, wait, I don't have to answer it really quickly. I can actually stop and think about those strategies.
But this is a real ideological shift, right? Like if you
Huge.
think of taking myself back to my eighth grade math B classroom where I'm under pressure for multiple assessments. I'm a third year teacher. I'm trying to figure it out. You got stacks of paperwork. Sort of what do you say to that teacher that's also like not trying to pressure the students, but also very much feeling the pressure? Um, how do they sort of do what Jenny said and sort of suspend that anxiety and support the kids along the way? What does that look like? How does that coaching feel and sound to y'all? Or what ways are you doing it in your own work?
Well, I mean, I can answer again, and then Laura, I'm going to be very quiet. I think that one of the great things is changing the culture of mathematics classroom, right? I mean, it really comes down to that. And I, you know, our first go around was really bringing these games and really bringing some joy and bringing the practice to look differently and the reasoning and elevating kids' thinking. And we did that for 2 years. And now we're really digging in even a little bit further in how teachers can assess math back fluency in ways that are supportive of students. And are other ways to assess back fluency than just regurgitating numbers onto a piece of paper. So Jenny wrote a great article. There's more of it in the work she does. And then in the little purple book, I really should remember the name of that one, that Jenny wrote, we are really leaning into a lot of there you go, Math Back Fluency. Boy, it's got a really catchy title. Um, we're leaning into the work that she has provided for us. And then there's also all sorts of tools that teachers can use to help build that. And they're made already for you. Jenny's done a beautiful job. Sorry, I keep on just bragging on you. To produce a lot of different ways that we can actually find out where our students are at without the punitive type of testing that might be easier, and maybe it's our first fallback. But we're seeing teachers get really excited about the formative assessment they can do while kids are doing fluency activities. And that's the best way to be assessed. You've got a teacher who's just walking around with a clipboard going, yes, I see what you're doing, and walking away and letting them continue to play. So it's changing the culture. I guess that's where I started, and that's where I'll end.
Yeah, I think that's absolutely spot on, Alanna. And I think in that, it's that math isn't a solo endeavor either, that it can be in the classroom, working in teams and having small group discussions and making mathematics sense, not only in your small group, but as a classroom as a whole. So really engaging in mathematics, yeah, through a community of learners is one way to help address this.
So then this is great because there's two more questions. And one is about sort of like how do we work better in the early grades around fluency so that we're not in the middle grades sort of still addressing that in big ways? So would love to hear your thoughts on that. And perhaps you could combine that with some ideas about speed. What is the role of speed? Does speed matter? When does it matter? I mean, I think there was one point in New York where we just untimed the state exams And I feel like kids did better, but no one felt the pressure of that timing. Um, is the speed important? Does it matter? How does that link with fluency? Would love to hear all of your thoughts on that. Let's go, Laura, Jenny, Alana.
Okay, yeah. So, and it's so funny you brought up New York and wanting the speed and assessments. In New York, we really are trying to rethink assessments, specifically looking at, project-based, and performance-based learning. And so that it's not as traumatic as clearly it was for you, because you remember that. Um, but in terms of like, other ways, for helping at those early ages, representations can't be underestimated. In other words, it's, representations, being able to choose and use appropriate representations really is a key part of mathematical fluency and problem solving. So using the representations that make the most sense for each individual learner to help them access the math, whether it's the base 10 blocks or other pictorial representations that, they can draw, whatever they need to really get to that sense making. And then when that's internalized, then that develops that automaticity. So yeah, so I'd say representations really can be helpful in those early grades.
I love that. Visuals do matter a ton.
Yeah.
Well, Dia, you talked about, what can we do to help the later grades? And I'm going to go both directions. So in the early grades, we have what I like to call significant strategies because they grow. And so that means if you receive an older child that hasn't learned those strategies, then you can drop down to smaller numbers, more like whole numbers to build their strategic competence and then grow into like whole numbers or fractions or whatever. So I'll just take the example of the first problem we solved today, 201 minus 195. In the early grades, I've worked on helping students understand like 9 minus 8 is not just take away. It's also find the difference. And we have, to go to representations, Laura, little bikes on a trail. How far apart are the two bikers? And connect that is also difference. That's also subtraction. So how would you like to think about 9 minus 8? Would you like to think about it as how far apart those numbers are, or would you like to take away 8 from 9? And then that dispositional choice that they could think about it either way sets them up for success with a problem in the hundreds place. And by the way, let's go to decimals and fractions, because I see a lot of crazy stuff happening with the subtraction of fractions for something like 6 1/8 minus 5 7/8. Just picture those two numbers on a ruler. They're 2/8 apart. And there's a lot of regrouping and mess happening there. And so I think that we start in the early grades, again, with these key pieces. And one of them, by the way, is decomposing. I mentioned that with the research. But in order to do the problem that, that we're thinking about, sometimes we're pulling a fraction part over to other number. But this idea of taking apart numbers and putting them back together is like foundational to whole number operations, fractions, decimals. We use it in algebraic thinking. So that I say to kindergarten teachers, you cannot overteach decomposing. You cannot overteach decomposing. So it's so useful and it grows with the student. So to me, that's the early number concepts. And then getting them off to a good start is another reason why we don't want them to just memorize their basic facts. They need to learn the making tens strategy, the one that I talked about. Another one that Arthur Baruti brought to the table recently, less than 10 years ago, he started studying what he called use 10, which is I call it the birth of compensation. So instead of adding 9 plus 6, you would pretend it's 10 plus 6. And then 9 plus 6 is one less because 9 is one less than 10. So that's that relational understanding coming into play. But notice no decomposing is required. And that's what he thought is we have students who tend to be weak at decomposing. So this strategy will help them more. And in his studies, he found that was true. In my purple book, I renamed it Pretend to 10 because when I was working in urban Louisville, in our fact fluency work, I noticed that this word resonated with little ones. They're like, and then they could start using like near doubles, 6 plus 7. They're like, well, I just pretended it was 6 plus 6 and I just added one more on. And so that idea of pretending it's one thing and fixing it is the idea behind compensation. So I think then those ideas also grow to how you would solve the problems we started with today. So it's making sure that you're building these strategies in with single digits so that they can grow them beyond single digits.
Fantastic. Alanna, you want to contribute on this one?
I tell you, I was just thinking about like the distributive property of multiplication over addition. And when in the purple book that Jenny is referencing, she's talking about a multiplication derived strategy of adding or subtracting a group. And that is all the basis for a lot of the mathematics that we do in seventh and eighth grade, right? And it's all, and then I was thinking about the number line. And just think about if kids can think about the distance away from one number to another number on a number line, think about how well they're going to transition into a Cartesian plane, right? Think about how well they're going to be able to figure out the distance between two numbers on a plane. And then even the distance formula doesn't need to be memorized. You can really figure this out. I mean, there's just so much that you can figure out based on these early fluency understandings.
I think
So.
that's so important and so real because I don't think we teach absolute value until sort of somewhere in sixth, seventh, eighth grade, right? And you're probably advanced if you're getting some of that like graphing absolute value and understanding that as a form of measurement. It actually measures a space versus actually being a thing or a difference, like sort of what Jenny was saying. I am only just curious about what you think this means for vertical alignment and integration. When we think about what needs to happen in our earlier grades, we think about these beautiful resources that are the numeracy briefs that are sort of acting as guideposts along the way, along with the research and the partnerships in Chicago that you all have. How do you think about vertical integration and sort of what considerations do you have as you think about that K-12 continuum for either students, teachers, or families, or even just your own sort of iteration on the curriculum? Would love to hear your thoughts about vertical alignment and integration. Anybody? Not all at once.
Well, I feel like I kind of was hinting at that with talking about how to grow the strategy. So I think that's part of the vertical alignment. And I feel like our standards have helped us out more in the whole number realm and in basic facts, talking about strategies, but we don't have as much help up there at the older grades. So like, I think there, it'll say like add fractions, but it doesn't really say using strategies. And so I think as a field, we could do better as the numbers get more complicated in emphasizing the importance of reasoning strategies and efficient strategies. So I definitely think there's a trajectory there. Specific to basic facts, there definitely is a vertical alignment. For example, I'll just give this as an example since Alanna mentioned add a group. If they're doing add a group, so let's say they know 7 times 5 and they're using that for 7 times 6. So they're thinking 5 sevens is 35. And now I need one more 7. I need to add 7. Well, if they're going to count up by ones, that's not efficient. If they can get to 35 and they realize it's 5 more to 40 and then 2 more, 42, that's an efficient strategy. Well, that's built on the fact that they've learned to make a 10 with their basic facts and then also realized that not only is like 5 plus 7, they can jump up to the 10 and over the 10 or make a 10, either way you want to think about it. But that also works for 28 plus 7 and 36 plus 8, and that they get this idea, go to the benchmark and beyond, to the benchmark and beyond, and then that idea helps them with their multiplication facts. So there's the direct lineage, but then there's these other nuances that the investment of time in the making 10 strategy enables them to be efficient with their multiplication strategies, which in turn enables them to be successful with, strategies beyond the basic facts. It's like go slow to go fast, whatever that saying is.
No, I like that, Jenny, that you had pointed out about the standards, because that is an important role of the state to really think about what should be in those K-12 learning standards. Is there vertical alignment? And which and thinking about, well, what even concepts should be in there? That's, such a fundamental question, because that could change everything in terms of fluency, conceptual understanding, all these other aspects. So, I think it's important for states to continually be looking at their learning standards around mathematics and thinking, are they the most current? Are they really promoting the vertical alignment and the fluency that we really want to see in students?
Those are powerful. And I think it leads me to a big question that I'm going to ask about. We've seen over the last maybe 7 or 8 years this move around reading and literacy. And what we've noticed in the policy space is folks trying to sort of translate fluency and literacy right over to fluency in mathematics. And in terms of implementation, there are some big questions. In terms of language, there are some big questions. Would love to hear from you all about like, how do you do this as a system, actually sort of differentiate between fluency in reading and mathematics? How are they different? How do they feel similar? Sort of what bones have you built within your systems to ensure that these sort of stay whole and complete, but also that we can see the sort of relationship between them. Maybe Alanna looks like she's thinking about this. I'll go Jenny, then Laura, then Alanna.
Reading and math are not the same.
Thank
They
you.
have short answer, they are not the same. I have a very long answer to this, but can I just point out that math comes from a inquiry domain. It's about figuring things out. And so if we're going to have our system, our educational system, prepare people to become mathematicians, like reading prepares them to become readers, then our instruction has to mimic what mathematicians do. You look at a problem and you ask yourself, how can I figure this out? So they can't go through school being shown how to do everything, and then later you expect them to figure stuff out. So I feel like they're very different at the core. I'll stop there and open the door
Yeah.
to my colleagues.
Yeah, no, this is a really interesting question, because at New York State, we started with a literacy initiative, and we had a set of 7 literacy briefs that were developed by Dr. Noni Lasso from, Harvard Graduate School of Education. And we saw and had a statewide event, and we saw how much the educators in the state really appreciated having the research around the science of reading distilled down into the briefs and helping them make sense of it, and also what the expectations of the state are too. I think that's an important thing. People do want to know what do we think, for example, the science of reading is. So that's when we replicated this idea, not because we think that math is the same thing as reading, but because we saw it from a resource perspective of, hey, these briefs really are helpful. And in fact, so much so, with the math briefs, one thing that we're doing differently with these is that we're now in working with Teaching Works and Dr. Ball around implementation guides that would support each of those briefs. So we're really excited to be able to launch those, sometime hopefully next year. So providing further support, but also making it's not the same as reading. And, I know that reading, they've got their reading wars, and how somehow that I construct of, the war now needs to happen at the math level. But fortunately, I don't think that's gaining as much traction, because there really isn't a war. I think that people do understand, you need all aspects of mathematics.
I think that's right, Laura. And implementation and ideation are totally different, right? It may be that the briefs are a great vehicle, right? To bring it to folks. And I'm glad that's actually working for teachers and districts. I mean, you guys have a lot on your hands, and that's no small feat. Alanna, thoughts here?
All over the place is where I am. Because what Jenny said made me really think about how we are encouraging more math instruction to be problem-based and be open-ended, so that our students whose jobs and careers and lives will go in so many different ways, we really can't teach them every single way to do something. And the problems that they're going to face are beyond our ken, but what we can teach them is how to attack a problem, how to step back, how to think about things. So there is something about mathematics that truly is this sense making, figuring things out, getting messy with the mathematics that is kind of categorically different than the teaching of reading. And I'm a huge reader, by the way. I wouldn't say I'm not a reading person, but so I just love really thinking about the differences, and there are connections. We absolutely love discourse in the classroom, in the math classroom. We are stealing turn and talk from the reading classroom. We are helping with sentence stems to get good language development in the math classroom. I actually see math as supporting so much of the literacy, because we are engaging students in conversations that they really want to have. Wait, I don't agree with you. They're having really good conversations that totally can support the literacy.
Jump in, Jenny.
I would also just like to say that reading and math are also treated very differently in schools. So we have a lot more time devoted to reading, a lot more professional development. I'm speaking elementary primarily. There's more instructional time. There's more confidence on the part of teachers. It's positioned in the morning. It gets privileged treatment, and it gets respect in society. You don't really hear a lot of people saying, I'm not a good reader. They might say, I don't like to read, but you rarely hear people say, I'm not a good reader. So we have a different challenge when it comes to systemic change. And we have, these experts here that are working, across states, across giant districts. We're working across Kentucky in the same way, trying to change a culture that thinks it's fine to not, ensure that students are mathematically competent when they leave fifth grade, when they leave eighth grade, when they leave high school. We just have a huge task to shift our culture of math teaching.
But it's shifting. And what's so
It is
beautiful
shifting.
is I believe that it's shifting because of the three of you. And I feel incredibly inspired by the work you're doing at each of your levels. We can't do anything without solid and really good research. We don't know if the research works if we don't actually put it into action, like New York is doing. And we have no idea if, even when it's in action, if it's actually touching kids and classrooms. And so the work you're doing in Chicago is also equally important. Would love to hear just one quick thing as we wrap up. We've got 2 minutes left. What is inspiring you about the future of math education in this moment? Would love to hear that from each of you. I know our audience would love to hear that. So whoever wants to jump in, just jump in.
I'll just say, I really think we are reaching a place where it's gaining momentum in terms of let's make things better collectively without a war happening. I feel like the legislation is trying to put resources into change. I feel that way here in Kentucky. We have so many people engaged in the work. We're very busy. Administrators are involved. Teachers are involved. We're getting really excited about how we can really improve math learning opportunities for students. And I feel like that's happening in so many different states. I get to pop in on different states and see what's happening. So I really am excited about the systemic change efforts, including NMIP, by the way.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's why I think, we're so excited in New York to launch our numeracy initiative. How many times do you get to elevate a particular subject area? And so I think that maybe that is one thing that the literacy conversation did, is it brought to a national, scale, a conversation about something in education. And so now we get to do that with math, and we know so much. We've learned a lot in the last, several decades about what, works for students. And so we now get to actually implement, effective evidence-based practices and culturally responsive sustaining practices. I think that's something that has not been in the conversation before, and I think is really important so that we can have equitable access for all students in math.
Alanna, final word.
Just let's keep it going. We've got a big groundswell coming up of people really understanding math as a joyful experience, and we want kids to be in that space with their whole selves, with their identities, and everything that comes along with it.
Awesome. It is an honor to work alongside the three of you. I am inspired by your work, and I appreciate you for taking the time to be with us today to share just the tiny bit of your expertise, because I know these waters run deep. We appreciate you. The audience appreciates you, and I wish you a great afternoon. Thanks.
Great. Thank you for having this webinar. This has been fantastic.
Of course.
Thank you so much. I'm sure our audience would love a part two. So we'll keep you posted, Laura, on what comes next. Thank you all.
Okay.
Have
Thank
a
you.
great rest of the week.
Thanks. Great talking with you all.
Bye.
Bye-bye.